I originally titled this dream with a more controversial title, but perhaps I shouldn't in case nobody wants to come and talk about it. But I do actually want to talk about it simply because it's important and pertains to foreign policy. Foreign policy can either lead to peace or war, and war is often started for reasons often unknown by the people expected to fight and die in them. And therefore, it is important to understand foreign policy, but most people don't understand foreign policy because they don't even understand their own history. So why would you expect them, the people who don't even understand their own history, to understand the histories of the countries that their government is bombing in their name? This is a problem of empires. And one of the more interesting things about America is the different kinds of Christianity that have mushroomed since the European arrived. We know that Quakers are categories of Christians who Quakers, Anabaptists, Calvinists, Presbyterians, all these other ones who are not part of the established church are forms of Christians that flourished in America, including Unitarian Christians, Jehovah's Witnesses, that sort of thing, Mennonites, the Amish, and they flourished in America because there was no established system of government ready to crush them. So they were allowed to establish their independent colonies in Pennsylvania and Utah and all those other places, because America is a land of cults and cannot and could not suppress all these different kinds of church and different kinds of American Christianity. Hi, Assad. Let me try to get my thoughts together about the different kinds of Christianity in America. So the non-denominational kinds of Christianity would be, as I was saying, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Amish, Shakers, Quakers, and all these other Mennonites. And they were basically Christian, and they didn't want to be conscripted into fighting anyone's imperial wars. And therefore they were discriminated against. But they still wanted to hold on to their Christian identity, you see. So that is necessary to establish how Christianity under absolute monarchy would be using the subjects of their subjects to fight and die in imperial wars. And obviously, these Mennonites, Amish, Jehovah's Witnesses, etc., didn't want to be conscripted by their kings in Europe, and when they came to America, they didn't want to be conscripted by the American government either. No, I've never been to Auschwitz. I don't know why you think I'm selfish. I am talking about the First Amendment rights of Americans. That was what I was trying to do when I started a discussion about what E. Michael Jones might call the Holocaust narrative. I haven't read the book, but I imagine he is saying that it is a narrative that was formulated after the war. I don't see how. I don't know any juveniles who talk about the Holocaust. Juvenile delinquents don't take an interest in history and law and free speech, do they? Am I questioning the narrative? It would appear that it is not allowed, not even in America. Thank you for reminding me of what I was trying to say. So let's have a look at the Wikipedia entry of the legality of Holocaust denial. There we are. And obviously there's a whole list of countries that that it is illegal to do. But now we have America in the list. I should really read it all. I mean, did all these European countries fight a war and then find that they're not allowed to talk about it afterwards? Okay, I should read it. Read a list of you. There's a table. Australia, ambiguous. Austria, illegal. Belgium, illegal. Bosnia-Herzegovina, illegal when inciting hatred or violence. Bulgaria, illegal when inciting hatred or violence. Canada, illegal. Czech Republic, illegal. Denmark, legal. Estonia, legal. Finland, legal. France, illegal. Greece, illegal when inciting hatred or violence. Germany, illegal. Hungary, illegal. Israel, illegal. Now, isn't it interesting? It's illegal in Israel. Italy, illegal. Japan, legal. Why can't the Japanese deny the Holocaust if they want to? Latvia, legal, because it was Russian, presumably. Liechtenstein, illegal. Lithuania, illegal. Luxembourg, illegal. Montenegro, illegal when inciting hatred or violence. Netherlands, illegal. Portugal, illegal when inciting discrimination. Poland, illegal. Romania, illegal. Russia, illegal. Serbia, legal. Slovakia, illegal. Spain, legal. Yes, because Spain wasn't in the war. Sweden, illegal. Switzerland, illegal. Ukraine, illegal. United Kingdom, legal. I would say ambiguous. United States, legal. I would say ambiguous. But it hasn't been tested, so we don't know. So let's go down to what it says about America. With Israel, I always think, if it's their Holocaust, then surely they can deny it. It's their thing, right? So they can, but it's illegal in Israel, which affirms my view that Israel is just an American colony. Which is increasingly becoming undeniable. Let's go down to United States. Now, why I think it's ambiguous in America is this. In the United States, Holocaust denial is constitutionally protected free speech under the First Amendment. A United States court in 1981, in a case brought by Merle Mermelstein, took judicial notice of the occurrence of gassings in Auschwitz during the Holocaust, declaring that a legally incontestable fact. And Merle Mermelstein is a Jew who was claiming a prize from the Institute of Historical Review. So here's a background. The Institute for Historical Review in 1980 promised a $50,000 reward to anyone who could prove that Jews were gassed at Auschwitz. So Mermelstein wrote a letter to the editors of the Los Angeles Times and others, including the Jerusalem Post. The Institute for Historical Review wrote back, offering him $50,000 for proof that Jews were, in fact, gassed in the gas chambers of Auschwitz. Mermelstein, in turn, submitted a notarized account of his internment at Auschwitz and how in 1944 he witnessed Nazi guards ushering his mother and two sisters and others towards, as he learned later, gas chamber number 5. The IHR refused to pay the reward, stating that Mermelstein's notarized account was not sufficient proof. Represented by public interest attorney William John Cox, Mermelstein subsequently sued the IHR in the Superior Court of Los Angeles County for breach of contract, anticipatory repudiation, libel, injurious denial of established fact, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and declaratory relief. On October 9, 1981, both parties in the Mermelstein case filed motions for summary judgment, in consideration of which Judge Thomas T. Johnson of the Superior Court of Los Angeles County took judicial notice of the fact that Jews were gassed to death at the Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland during the summer of 1944. Judicial notice meaning that the court treated the gas chambers as common knowledge and therefore did not require evidence that the gas chambers existed. On August 5th, 1985, Judge Robert A. Venke entered a judgment based upon the stipulation for entry of judgment agreed upon by the parties on July 22, 1985. The judgment required IHR and other defendants to pay $90,000 to Mermelstein and to issue a letter of apology to Mr. Mel Mermelstein, a survivor of Auschwitz-Birkenau and Buchenwald, and all the other survivors of Auschwitz for pain, anguish, and suffering caused to them. So, from a legal standpoint, what is somebody declaring that you saw on an affidavit conclusive of the truth of your statement? This is really what it's all about. It could be, people have been known to swear affidavits that were not true. Anyway, to continue, in a pre-trial determination, Judge Thomas T. Johnson declared, "This court does take judicial notice of the fact that Jews were gassed to death at Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland during the summer of 1944. It is not reasonably subject to dispute, and it is capable of immediate and accurate determination by resort to sources of reasonably indisputable accuracy. It is simply a fact." Now, I don't know if it was ever asked of the IHR what what proof would satisfy them? Let's read on. In California, the evidence code permits the court to take judicial notice of facts and propositions of generalized knowledge that are so universally known that they cannot reasonably be the subject of dispute. I mean, like what? Like the divinity of Jesus? Well, that's disputed. Well, even the flat Earth. Sorry, the fact that the Earth is round is still being disputed. It would appear from internet debate forums. And of course, once upon a time, it was disputed that the Earth went round the Sun. So really, it's probably true what E. Michael Jones saying that truth is the opinion of the powerful. Do we want to live in a society like this? And also, we have to okay, now we come to what the IHR said. In 1986, the IHR, along with its founder Willis Carto, sued Mermelstein for allegedly libeling them during an interview with a New York City radio station, but dropped the lawsuit in 1988. Mermelstein also sued the IHR in 1988 for an article in the IHR newsletter that examined what it considered to be flaws and inconsistencies in his 1981 lawsuit testimony. In 1988, Mermelstein, who was a member of the International Auschwitz Committee, included photo enlarged copies of IHR's checks to him totaling $90,000 along with their apology letter in the exhibit From Ashes to Life at the Mills House Art Gallery in Garden Grove, California. The exhibit also included other Holocaust documentation from Mermelstein's collection, including the photos of his family and other emaciated camp victims and survivors. Mermelstein was portrayed by Leonard Nimoy, and Cox was played by Dabney Coleman in a 1991 film Never Forget and the 1981 lawsuit. He wrote of the court battle in his autobiography titled By Bread Alone. About the so-called deniers of the Holocaust and who they really are, see my letter to the editors dated August 1980 in my book, By Bread Alone, the story of A-4685. So what really is the operating question here? The question here is whether it infringes on the First Amendment, whether taking judicial notice of the Holocaust infringes the First Amendment. So this is really the legal point. Thank you all for kind of pushing me into this, really. So that's it. Could it defend, could it infringe on the First Amendment, on your First Amendment rights? Did it? So the Institute of Historical Review basically denied it, right? It denied the Holocaust and said, we'll pay you $50,000 if you can prove that it actually happened. And Mermelstein sent them pictures and an affidavit, a sworn affidavit, and the Institute said that's not enough. But what we're not sure about is what would have satisfied the Institute of Historical Review. So, yeah, so that, I think, is it still in existence? Let's have a look. It was Founded in 1978 in Torrance, California by David McCalden and Willis Carto, and is headquartered in Fountain Valley, California. It published the Journal of Historical Review until 2002, but now disseminates its material through its website via email. The parent corporation of the IHR and the affiliated Noontide Press is the Legion for the Survival of Freedom. Okay, and before I go, I should mention Avigdor Miller, and I should also post what Rabbi Mizrahi said, because he has been accused, he, an ultra-Orthodox rabbi, was accused of Holocaust denial. So if Jews can get into trouble over Holocaust denial, I guess that would really, really intimidate Gentile Americans from discussing American foreign policy in Israel, right? Okay, let me find you the report. I think it was in the Jerusalem Post. I should read it out to you, I suppose. Rabbi Yosef Mizrahi made controversial claims in 2015, suggesting that only about 1 million Jews, according to the halakhic Jewish legal standards, were killed during the Holocaust, implying that the majority of the 6 million victims were not halakhically Jewish due to high intermarriage rates. This statement, widely reported by the Jerusalem Post and other outlets, sparked significant backlash from Holocaust historians, Jewish leaders and organizations, including the Simon Wiesenthal Center. So he did issue an apology in 2016. Stating that he had been shown inaccurate statistics and acknowledged that the number of non-halakhically Jewish victims was minimal. He expressed regret for any offense caused to Holocaust survivors, blah, blah, blah. But the point is that if the premise were true, if 6 million, if there were 6 million Jews, and you divide it by 4, if the Nazis had sort of bigged up the number of Jews who were not halakhic, then the actual number was, should be divided by 4. But I mean, I guess we'll never know because all these records have been lost, and we don't really know about the observance of these individual Jews. We don't know if they're observant or not, because according to ultra-Orthodox Jews, Reform Jews and secular Jews and atheist Jews are heretics and should be considered not part of Judaism. And some rabbis even say that these Jews actually incite anti-Semitism against, the properly practicing Jews. And also, yes, Avigdor Miller, whom Rabbi Mizrahi often quotes, says that the Holocaust was a divine response. So it was punishment from God because, according to him, assimilation and intermarriage are worse than death. The German Jews and others ignored the Torah teachers and refused to desist from their mad race into assimilation. The Nazis were sent to prevent them and rescue them before they were swallowed up by the nations. So Avigdor Miller is saying that Jews have a divine duty to keep themselves in existence, and marrying Gentiles was not a way of doing it. Yes, you're right, young God. Mizrahi, well, I think that there is a category of Jews called Mizrahi Jews who are considered very, very proper and very observant. Young God, yes, of course there will be numbers, but the point is, whatever the numbers are, telling people that they can't talk about it without going to prison is just going to make them want to talk about it, right? And then when they find themselves going to prison, they're just going to blame Jews some more. So I'm saying Holocaust denial actually incites anti-Semitism. And it's this kind of fetid atmosphere of censorship and self-censorship that means that Americans cannot discuss US foreign policy in the Middle East without maliciously accusing each other of being Nazis. And not only this, Jews are also accusing each other of being Nazis. So nobody can talk about it without horrible accusations being made against them. And it would be a shame if, through fear of discussing Western foreign policy, the West causes another world war to break out. It just won't be a good reflection on Westerners, the West, and the political system that keeps it going. So my take on this is simply that Israel would be a very prestigious colony for any powerful Gentile empire to have. And before it became an American colony, it was a British colony. And before it was a British colony, it was a colony of the Ottoman Empire, because that was who ran it. So, sadly for these Westerners who considered themselves Christian in World War One and World War Two, Christianity is just not good at protecting Christians from each other. I mean, look what the Europeans did to each other in 2 world wars, and before that, the European War of Religions. So my take is simply this: Christianity has not protected Europeans from each other. And that's why Christian nationalism is so dangerous to the First Amendment, because the logic of the First Amendment is the logic of Christian nationalism would be let me start again, I'm so sorry. The logic of being a Christian nationalist is to get the American government to pass a Christian amendment to make America officially a Christian republic. Now, I know a lot of people think it's unlikely because the First Amendment is so, sacred and holy, right? And to propose the abolition of the First Amendment would be horribly un-American. Unfortunately, I keep bumping into Americans who say they don't care about the First Amendment. And some of them even support a monarchy. Now, I may not be American, but it would be a tragedy for humanity if somehow or other Americans are tricked into giving up their First Amendment rights. So I hear, idiotic arguments like, oh, the First Amendment has never done anything for me. I suggest to you that it would be as moronic as somebody buying a cookbook, a recipe book, and expecting the cookbook to do the cooking. So obviously, any law, and laws would be written on paper, would be completely useless if it's not followed, if nobody defends its principles, right? It's just a piece of paper, a worthless piece of paper, if no one will defend it. So obviously, people have to defend it. But it appears that Americans don't even notice when their First Amendment rights have been abolished. They just don't notice. They don't notice when their wives forbid them from saying certain things, or even for threaten to divorce them if they vote for Trump. So it was, a few years ago, but there was this, I think it was in the New York Times, I heard that a wife had threatened to divorce her husband if he voted Trump. I mean, this is crazy. And I suppose, all these American men are too ashamed to admit it. So they don't even complain. They don't even complain. They don't even say how scared they are. And that, I think, is a problem. So, with regard to, shall I say his name? Well, I think he's very courageous for admitting that he's afraid of his wife, and also saying that most Christian American husbands are terrified of their wives, and that therefore their First Amendment rights have already been lost. 1984, it happened centuries ago. So it was much worse before, under Christian totalitarianism. So when the Catholic Church was firing on all four cylinders, European kings would be subject to being bossed around by the Pope, told to go on crusades, issued with interdicts if they refused to comply, until Henry II actually threatened to convert to Islam because he was so fed up with it. And his son, King John, also, it was only rumoured, it might not be true, but people tried to blacken his name by saying he was going to do a deal with some Muslim leader by promising to convert to Islam. So I'm inclined to think that there's no smoke without fire. And kings were really, really fed up with being bossed around by the Pope in Rome. And this is proven true by the wars of the Reformation on the European continent as well as in England. And it was so oppressive that kings were, that monarchs rebelled. And from what we know of how Catholicism operates is that you have to confess. You have to go to confession every week. Yes, that is the ritual, and that is the way you basically spill your guts to the government. Of course, the priest reports to the king, right? So sensible mothers, Catholic mothers, or mothers forced to be Catholic, will tell their children, don't confess anything too incriminating. Only confess your venial sins. Do not, confess to, fornication, adultery, sodomy, and all the other mortal sins, because you're just going to get yourself killed or put in prison or severely lowered in status. Just confess to venial sins. Let's look up what they are, because we know that sins are divided helpfully into venial and mortal. So venial sin means forgivable. So let's have a list of them. I can't seem to find any in this Wikipedia entry. I'm sorry. Well, you can look up. Okay, let's look up list. Maybe there's something that says list, because the Wikipedia entry is not helpful. Venial sins are lesser offences that weaken but do not sever one's relationship with God. They are typically small lapses in judgment, charity, or self-control that, while not grave, can accumulate and harm spiritual life over time. White lies, gossip, impatience, neglecting prayer, mass, or spiritual practices, laziness, sloth, judgmental attitudes, or passing unfair opinions without full understanding, envy or resentment towards someone else's success or possessions, minor acts of disrespect like rudeness or inconsideration in daily interactions, excessive indulgence in food, drink, or entertainment, wasting time or failing to use time wisely, breaking minor laws such as illegal parking or digital privacy, reckless driving or carelessness that endangers others, failing to help the poor, those in need, not paying debts promptly. Well, I don't know how eternal and universal they are, but I think you get the idea. So I'm saying it was very, very oppressive, that even kings rebelled, and therefore, it began the break for freedom for the European. Yes, I know the West looks bad, but I'm just trying to explain to you how it happened. Okay, so we get to the interest bit thing, but one of the slippery slopes is the potential overlap of Christian nationalism and Zionism, because Jesus and temples and real estate, who's a real king of? Oh, that's a silly question. There will be no king of Jerusalem. Zionism is an Anglo-American imperial project. I've been trying to explain to you. Jewish Zionism is impossible without Gentile support and cooperation. Israel, being such a small piece of land, cannot sustain enough, power to, control, to defend itself without the support and military support of America, and because it costs a lot of money, and people, and being told, and Americans, Westerners, being told they can't question it, makes them want to question it all the more. So anyway, I'm question the validity of Holocaust denial in a free society, and I am pointing out that it actually infringes their First Amendment, okay? And I guess there will be Americans who will deny that Holocaust denial infringes their First Amendment, but I'm saying it is important for Americans to be able to discuss US foreign policy in the Middle East without fearing being accused of being a Nazi, which they all clearly do feel. Well, I mean, it must be horrible to be forced into pretending to be a religion you're not, right? What it does to somebody's mental health must have been terrible. Yes, thank you, Yon God, for saying many of the problems of the world has to do with forcing someone to publicly affirm. Um, did you mean that many of the problems of the world has to do with forcing someone to publicly affirm beliefs that they do not sincerely hold? Is that what you really mean? Because, well, we don't like being lied to, and we don't like being openly lied to, and we will hate all the more being told to repeat lies that we hate. And this has basically been the lot of the European for many centuries. I'm sure there are lots of perfectly rational Europeans who question the Trinity, but would have been too afraid to say anything about it, and this has basically caused all these Republican revolutions. It didn't happen, in China because, whatever you think of the Chinese, that the Emperor of China never made the Chinese believe in absurdities. So, well, at least they wouldn't be angry with him for that. And therefore, you didn't get any, emperors of China being beheaded or murdered with his entire family, right? King Felipe of the Sixth of Spain is the current formal claimant of the King of Jerusalem. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay, I hope I've made some new points. I really wasn't expecting to discuss this subject, but because people in Chris's stream are sort of accusing me of. Okay, how can anyone deny or affirm something they have no direct knowledge of? A, history is written by the victor. B, we already know that our government lies to us for their their reasons, right? And we know that the sacred narrative of the Anglo-American Empire is a narrative that they're the good guys and saved the Jews from the Nazis and are currently protecting Israel, and that's why they're the good guys. But do their own people even believe that? Because they hate their government. They don't trust their government. So really, I hope Americans will make the most of their First Amendment rights and try to use them and try to identify circumstances and examples of it being infringed over time. So I'm saying affirmative action is First Amendment rights. Because discrimination is fundamentally an act of thought, right? So it doesn't matter if you believe that, a certain race is better or worse at doing whatever job, the employer, in order to keep his business afloat, has to choose the best possible people to do the job. If he gets it wrong, if he's a bad judge of character, then his business fails. If he hires the wrong kind of people to do the wrong kind of job, his business is going to fail. So we have to leave it up to him and not be DEIing him to death. I don't know what you mean by this. You're making a joke, but I don't quite understand. I don't get the joke. And finally, the point is that we now have the internet. We now can communicate across oceans and continents and be able to speak English. So why are we wasting time not saying what we mean? And, I'm actually saying we should discuss Christian nationalism, if only to debunk it. And this is what I want. So I'm very pleased that PVK is promoting it and promoting channels that want to discuss it. And of course, all the younger members of the TLC, they want to talk about it, but they're too afraid. They just sort of, mention it in one sentence in some 2-hour conversation because they're too terrified of saying, let's have a stream that actually says Christian nationalism, and then we can talk about it properly. I'm saying it's a trap. Don't fall for it, because it'll mean the end of the First Amendment. And if you do that, it would be, well, a tragedy, not just for the West, but for humanity, in that the country that is supposed to be the beacon of liberty has voluntarily, stupidly decided to abolish their First Amendment by being tricked with the fake prize of Christian nationalism. And I know how they're going to do it. They're going to say, look, you really hate those Jews. You really hate those Muslims, don't you? So all you have to do is pretend to be Christian, and then we can become a Christian republic, and then we can treat these Jews and Muslims as second-class citizens. So how about it? That is really what I think they're going to do. What do you mean you're on guard? The World War II social narrative. The post-war narrative. Yes, after every war, history will be rewritten. So you may not know that, Victorian school children were expected to memorize the kings and queens of England. Which royal house, and Tudors, Plantagenets, and all the rest of it, Stuarts, because you'd expect that. If you're a monarchy, you would have to learn about your monarchs. And so much of history about the learning of history has been changed because so many things have happened. So I'm saying that World War II was the founding of the American Empire, because the dumb Europeans basically destroyed themselves through fighting 2 world wars with each other. And then America just came in and took everything over, took over their colonies, took, the global empire of the British. They were handed a global empire on a platter by the stupid Europeans, who even now refuse to acknowledge their error. And I don't mind helping them, because I just can't bear to see them mumbling moronically to each other, hardly daring to say what's really on their minds. So just say it. Talk about Christian nationalism. Talk about how it's going to mean the abolition of the First Amendment, and maybe think if maybe you'd like to abolish the First Amendment, maybe you'd like to make Trump the absolute monarch. After all, he has so many sons, hasn't he? And ask yourself whether it would be a good idea to abolish the American Republic. I'm saying that would be a terrible thing.